So this is Becky.
And this is Corey, and welcome to our first episode.
Yeah, we're going to talk about The Secret of Shadow Ranch.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
We sure hope so, and we hope you are too.
Join us as we talk Nancy Drew cover to cover and click to click.
Welcome to Regular Nancy Drew.
Before we get started, I just want to say that we are going to be discussing both the Secret of Shadow Ranch books today, as well as the game by Her Interactive. So if you haven't read the books or played the game and you don't want spoilers, just be aware that lots of plot points are going to be discussed here in just a second.
So, first impressions, Corey. If you could describe Secret of Shadow Ranch using 3 words or less, how would you describe it?
That's a good question. I don't know, what words would you use to describe it?
Ranching, rock slides, racism.
Racism, yes. It's an exciting one. There's lots of action.
It is. There is lots of action in this one. It was surprising. I was shocked at Nancy's resiliency. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about it. I'm sure we'll talk about it. But the amount of times that she gets injured and gets up and just says, "Oh, I'm just a little bruised. I'm fine. I'm just a little bruised." I'm like, a house fell down on top of you, Nancy. What are you talking about?
You got bucked from a horse.
Yeah.
You were unconscious for 10 minutes. You should be in the hospital.
For real. So Nancy, I guess, is superhero status, or was walking around seriously injured all the time and just not saying anything about it.
There was no actual phantom. It was just a product of her concussion that she sustained the entire story.
The secret of the concussion horse.
Do we want to start with a quick summary, or we can talk about the publishing information?
Yeah, let's talk about the publishing information. So
we're going to talk about a couple different versions today.
Yeah, so apparently this was originally published in 1931, right? And ghostwritten by Mildred Wirt Benson, right?
Yes.
That's the correct name. Okay.
Yes.
And I know you actually bought that version.
I did. I read both of them, both the 31 and is it 59 or 60 that the second version was written?
65. It was revised
65.
in 1965. Yes. I just did a quick glance at Wikipedia to get the publication information and glanced at the plot summary for the earlier version. And just from glancing at that, it looked completely different than what I had just read.
Yeah, I went into it assuming that it was basically the same book. Maybe a few things had been taken out or a few small things had been changed, but it's a completely different story. None of the same characters are in it. People have different names than what they have in the newer version. Totally different plot. They even have different titles. The original was Secret at Shadow Ranch, not Secret of Shadow Ranch.
Wild. That is wild. Okay, so can we talk about the reason for that, maybe? Why did they decide to revise, Corey?
Well, everything I've read online says that the original 35 books in the series were rewritten in the 60s to remove some racist terms and attitudes.
To be honest, the newer one was way more racist than the old one.
Interesting.
There were maybe some outdated terms that mean something different now that I don't think it meant that back then, but now we would think of that as like, don't say that. That's not a good word to use in this situation. But
right.
Other than a few things like that, nothing jumped out at me as obviously being racist. Probably because there was only white characters written into this story. But
So do you think that there were no indigenous peoples in the first version?
It's not referenced. There's no cliff dwellings, nothing like that.
Wow. Fascinating. But it takes place in Arizona still, though, right?
It's still Shadow Ranch, but that's pretty much the only similarity.
So strange. What a strange choice.
There was one scene where Nancy's carrying a gun. I absolutely am in favor of removing that because we don't need to be talking to children about going out and shooting wild animals. But
we'll have to really do a deep dive into that in a later episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting that you think that the rewrite is more racist. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's a good spot to kind of jump in, just to say this book is problematic in a lot of ways.
Yes.
For its characterization of Indigenous people, and a lot of the terms that they use are not ones that we would use today.
Right.
But all that being said, we are two white ladies.
Yes.
And so you should definitely not just be listening to us talk about this, and should make sure to educate yourself on those topics, because we certainly don't know enough about it either.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to center our voices in this conversation, but we have the opportunity to talk about it, so we should address it at least.
We for sure are going to talk about it. So do you want to talk about the cover?
Yeah.
Or the covers. We'll start with the newer edition. Yeah. The one
which we both have. Looks like we both have the same version here.
So I learned this too, that the version that I have is the 1965 one. The cover art is done by somebody named Rue Nappy, I believe, if that's how you pronounce it. But this is apparently the third iteration of this cover. Obviously, there was the one for the 1931 version, but then there was an earlier cover that didn't include this phantom horse. So this is definitely the most recent cover. Nancy's riding a black horse that is rearing back. She's got a sick lime green shirt on. Mm-hmm. Her hair is rockin'. And a cute little 1960s kind of flip out on the bottom.
She's very fashionable.
She is incredibly fashionable. And there is a beautiful, my favorite part of the cover is the storm illustration in the back. I think that is beautiful. That is really cool looking.
Nancy is blonde on the first cover.
Oh, okay. Yes. Interesting. So this is one of the very first things that I wrote down when I was taking notes on this book is Nancy's Titian hair color. Because what color is Nancy Drew's hair? And actually, I thought that she was Titian haired before she was blonde haired.
I thought so too. I thought she was always
more redheaded, but this says she had a blonde bob originally.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating to me. I remember when I was little, and I read this for the first time, I had no idea what Titian meant, obviously.
I thought it said Titan for a long time.
Yeah, me too. So for those of you who may not be aware, Titian is a painter. He's a very famous painter. He used to paint a lot of redheaded ladies. So Titian hair is what that is. And apparently, I read this too when I was doing a Wikipedia dive, that Titian was popular at this time because women used to dye their hair this color using henna.
Oh, wow.
So, the more you know.
That is really cool. I had no idea.
Yeah. A quick plot summary?
Yeah. We open at the Phoenix airport. Nancy is meeting Bess and George because they are all going to go stay at Bess and George's aunt and uncle's ranch.
And they meet a creepy man at the airport. Well, not exactly meet him. He's just there. And he rifles through Nancy's bag. And they're like, what's that about? But then they take the drive to Shadow Ranch. They break down halfway because Shorty did not fill their canteen with water. Mm-hmm. Dave Gregory comes to rescue them.
Mm-hmm. He's a little prickly at first.
He is. He's surly and cross, upset that he has to come get these tender feet from the desert, but they make it there okay.
Mm-hmm. So they get to the ranch and they meet the Raleighs. They meet the cowboys on the ranch, who Dave Gregory, obviously, and then we have Shorty Steele, which I was surprised to learn that was his last name. I thought of him as Shorty Thurman, but Mrs. Thurman is the cook on the ranch. We also have Tex. I think there's a few other cowboys as well, but they're not referenced as much, right?
Yes, they're not as prominent.
And we also have one other girl staying at the ranch who they made it sound like she's 14, 15 years old, a little bit younger than Nancy and her friends. Her name is Alice. Is she related to them?
I think she's related to Bess and George. I think she's related to the Raleighs too.
Okay.
She has a very interesting story, And I am really surprised. Well, sorry, I'll try to stick to the summary, but I'm just really surprised that we don't have more to do with that in the story.
Yes. It did feel a little, I don't know, it felt a little shoehorned in to me, her mystery and everything going on with her. Because, I mean, I just knew the Dirk Valentine and Frances story from the game.
Right.
But it just felt strange to me and out of place. But reading the first one, that's like the only plotline that they kept from the original story. So it makes a lot more sense to me now of how it all fits into everything. But I don't know if you got the same impression that it just seemed like a big coincidence that the mysteries were related.
So, yes. So short answer, yes. Finish the plot summary, and then I'll tell you.
Okay, sorry, I'm jumping way ahead.
No, it's good. We can kind of, we'll quickly summarize that. A phantom horse keeps showing up. Mysterious accidents keep happening. Nancy finds a ghost town. There's a cabin on the mountain. Mm-hmm. There's dangerous stuff happening. There's a rock slide at one point. A house falls down on top of Nancy. Nancy's bucked off her horse.
Bess gets her horse stuck in the stream during this like flash flood. Nancy has to go rescue her. That was very, very stressful.
Very tense. A dog gets kidnapped and injured. Okay. Like the worst part of the book.
I know.
Okay. But also they named the dog a terrible name. So I'll just say that they named the dog Apache Chief, which is a terrible name for a dog because that is incredibly racist and, total co-opt of a very important title. That was great. But I say that tongue in cheek. But honestly, it was incredibly traumatic for me that the dog was just missing and they couldn't find the dog. That was the worst part of the book for me.
Yes. And then they just gave up at one point. They're like,
what the heck was that
totally
about?
Fine. We'll come back and check tomorrow. He's been gone for days. He might not have it tomorrow. Go get him. You can hear him. He's clearly close enough for you to go save him. But he ends up being okay.
That was stressful. And then there's a I'm skipping much closer to the end, but there is a barbecue and square dance that they go to.
Yes, that Nancy almost gets kidnapped.
A rodeo. Sorry, rodeo, barbecue, and square dance that they attend with their dates. All the cowboys. And
the cowboys.
Nancy basically gets an epiphany at this square dance that she knows where the treasure is. She understands the clues that Dirk Valentine left for Frances, and it's going to set a trap for the robbers and go get the treasure on her own with Bess and George and Alice, for some reason, accompanying them.
This small child tagging along. We should talk about Dirk and Frances a little bit and how they play into the story. So the Shadow Ranch was previously owned by, I think he was the sheriff in the story too. He had a daughter, Frances, who fell in love with the outlaw Dirk Valentine. So Dad has Dirk killed. Frances is distraught. I think she leaves Shadow Ranch permanently. Dirk leaves his treasure behind for Frances to find through the series of clues, and his horse is now the one, quote unquote, haunting Shadow Ranch. And Nancy's got to solve that mystery before she can solve the current mystery going on.
Yes. So honestly, though, is it a series of clues or is it one clue? Like,
I think it is just one clue. I'm too influenced by the game where it is an actual series of clues that we have to go through.
That's like the clue in the locket or watch. I can't remember what it is. It's a watch in the game, I know, but it might be a locket in the book. And on the back of the picture, it says, look in the green bottle under, and, we find the green bottle.
That's how we find out what's going on with
Dave is actually secretly related to Frances Humber because she got married eventually and had kids, and the treasure is actually legally his because it was left to her in Dirk Valentine's will. So he, being their descendant, is entitled to the treasure.
That's why he wasn't so welcoming at the beginning, because he didn't want Nancy poking around and finding out his secret. But then he's all nice and he asked Nancy to the rodeo.
The cowboy romance in this book is next level. It's really just too cute. So Nancy figures out where the treasure is. She goes to the cliff dwellings, finds the treasure, but surprise, surprise, the bank robbers, which we didn't really talk about the bank robbers. There are bank robbers in the area. It's not really important why they're there. They're just hiding out there and just heard about the treasure by chance and decided to go after it. That's literally it.
And they're squatting in Dirk Valentine's old cabin.
So they follow Nancy and friends there. And Nancy, through some quick thinking and sharp wits, is able to keep the treasure safe until they can be rescued by Dave. And then Dave gets the treasure, and that's really it.
Oh, well, in Alice's story, we didn't explain her part of the mystery.
So basically, she's there at the ranch because her dad worked at a bank, right? So this is kind of where the bank robbers come in. Her dad worked at a bank. The bank was robbed, and her dad mysteriously goes missing. And everybody thinks that her dad is involved in the bank robbery, and that's why he's obviously fled because he was involved in that. But she doesn't believe it because he's her dad, and she doesn't think that her dad would do that. And somehow, I guess this 14-year-old girl gets word up in Chicago that her dad's hiding out in this area or is down in this area. And she asks Nancy to help her because Nancy's a detective. And Nancy, of course, agrees. And they keep finding her dad's pastel pictures for sale everywhere, it seems. And then so they eventually think that he's being held at this cabin, right, where all the robbers are. They can't find him there.
Which is also where the dog was.
Right. There's evidence of him in the ghost town. And then eventually they find him when they go into the cliff dwellings. They find him tied up there. And he's like, oh, thank you for saving me. And what the biggest plot hole for me, and I wrote this down, is just that, like, how is it that this dude was being held captive by these bank robbers for 6 months? Mm-hmm. 6 months, Corey, this guy was being held captive. Why? For what purpose? Why did they not kill him or like drop him off in the middle of the nowhere? They were having to feed, secure, like this dude in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. Mm-hmm. And he says, I gotta look. The only mention that they have of this is, so the bank president said he had not been hurt, but had been underfed and was weak. I once heard Bryce say there was time enough to get rid of me when they left Shadow Mountain. That's all he says about it. All he says is, I think they were going to get rid of me after they left Shadow Mountain. Why?
Goodness. Why wait that long? It seems so strange that kidnapping bank robbers from Chicago would then decide to take their kidnappee to his brother-in-law's ranch where his daughter is and then go treasure hunting there.
Yeah. So the Francis and Dirk Valentine mystery is obviously way more interesting.
Yes.
Because it involves some history, there's some narratives there about, true love and all that. But the Alice and her dad thing seemed incredibly out of place and did not make much sense to me. However, I did think that her kind of plea to Nancy was incredibly compelling, and like her asking Nancy for help. And I just didn't understand why Nancy didn't focus more on it. Seems to me like you have this like old mystery, and there's like the supposed treasure, which seems kind of far-fetched, honestly. And then you have this 14-year-old girl basically begging you for help to find her missing dad, who's currently missing. And Nancy's like, oh, of course, Alice, of course we'll look for him. And
I'll get to it later.
Literally just like, is like, oh, Alice, I'm sorry, we don't have time to go to the cabin today.
And then they just happen to figure it out in the course of solving this other mystery. Right. Oh, everything's fine. Right.
That seemed...
Things do seem to fall into Nancy's lap pretty easily.
Yeah.
It seems, but...
Yes. So that I thought was just ridiculous. And kind of annoying on Nancy's part. I was like, Nancy, help this poor girl who's clearly so upset about this. But she's more interested in Dirk Valentine's treasure, which I think is, obviously I'm more interested in Dirk Valentine's treasure.
Right.
But it just seems like Nancy, being the compassionate woman that she is, should have maybe prioritized a little bit differently, in my opinion.
Yes. I was a little disappointed in the first version. I would definitely say I like the plot line of the newer version a lot better.
Ooh, Corey's throwing shade at Mildred Ward Benson.
I do like the way Nancy's portrayed in the original version. I feel like she's a little bit more independent. She's less likely to defer to some of the men on the ranch before she does things. She just does them because she can. That's the impression that I got, that she's a little bit stronger of a character than in the rewrite, where she's a little bit more demure and polite to everyone. So, but yeah, it's a little, the plot lines, it doesn't make as much sense as the newer one. We don't even find out that there is a mystery until like chapter 9. We don't arrive at Shadow Ranch until chapter 4. Like, it's
what
just,
is she doing at the beginning?
They are in River Heights, and Bess and George are like, come with us for the summer. And then they take this really long train journey to get there, and they meet who ends up being Alice's father on the train, but as somebody else. And so it's, all about their meeting with him and what he was like. And then they finally show up to the town. Then it's just a lot of trips up into the mountains and a lot of mishaps. Like, they'll go up into the mountains, and the flash flood where Bess's horse gets stuck, that happens. And then the next day they're like, okay, let's go up into the mountains again. And then they almost get attacked by this lynx, and Nancy has to shoot it.
You think they'd annoyed and be like, never mind, let's just...
Yeah. Alice is only supposed to be like a year younger than them. And she doesn't ask for Nancy's help at all. Like, she's visibly upset, but her father disappeared some 8-10 years ago. So it's not really at the forefront of her mind, like, let's go find him. She's just kind of sad and worse off for not having him in her life anymore. And it's kind of visible to Nancy. And Nancy's like, maybe I'll look into this a little bit if I have time. And it ends up coincidentally being wrapped up in the other mystery that she ends up solving.
Right.
So.
Which, in that mystery, Nancy becomes suspicious of a woman named Martha Frank living up in a cabin on Shadow Mountain because she's been neglecting and abusing this little girl named Lucy. With Carson's help, Nancy's able to learn that Martha's brother actually used to work for Lucy's parents, and when they fired him, he kidnapped her for revenge. He was actually caught in the act of this kidnapping by Alice's father, who he knocked out, and it caused him to forget who he was, which explains his disappearance and Alice's side of the story.
Wow. Okay. So can we get into pet peeves?
Absolutely.
What is the deal with them always having to describe Bess as slightly plump? And every time they talk about Bess, they try to start describing Bess. They're like, oh, and in the beginning, they're like, oh, Bess, her slightly plump but pretty friend. It's like, okay, hold on. First of all, you already called her slightly plump. Why are you having to call her that again? Secondly, you're always couching that, it's okay, she's still pretty, though. Yeah. Don't worry. And
as those things are mutually exclusive. You can either be pretty or you can be plump.
Right.
Okay.
And also, when you look at the illustrations, I know this is secondhand. She's literally the exact same size as Nancy, and they're all like this big around, so small, so small. What the hell is with that?
I will say there was a lot more of that in the older version. Every time Bess even thought about food, they were like, "Oh, is Bess hungry?
Yes!
Bess is allowed to eat."
Like when they're at the barbecue and stuff, they're always talking about what Bess is eating at the airport, and it's like, what is this about?
She's allowed to be hungry. She's allowed to eat, just like everyone else is.
And you don't got to make fun of her for it, George and Nancy. So there's that.
It bugs me. Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
That's okay, because I've got another one, baby.
Yeah. Go on, then.
So there is so much effort put towards making them seem attractive. So much writing about Nancy's, perfect hair and her beautiful blue eyes and their outfits. So much description about their outfits. Listen, y'all, I know I know this was written in the 1960s, and this is definitely framed towards young girls. So this is why. I get it. I know that it's why. And certainly there's nothing wrong with being interested in what people are wearing, but the amount of times they have to say, we went to go change, and Nancy put on, a matching yellow sweater set, and and her pearls. And it's like, and it was just a lot for me.
How about their outfits was it for the barbecue when they put on the...
It was. Yeah.
Frocks? What do they call them?
Well, it is a particularly derogatory name for Native people, so I will not repeat it. so that was...
They put on these ceremonial dresses to go to a barbecue. Right. And
yeah, they are, I think now they're called fiesta dresses, or there's another name for them as well. So if you're curious about what that is in the history of that, you can definitely look that up. Apparently it was a massive thing in the 1950s and 60s. These type of dresses were incredibly popular among, there's the picture of it, incredibly popular among, kind of middle class ladies at the time, which was an entire, of course, appropriation of Native culture. So
just egregious.
Absolutely.
Calling them costumes.
And put it in a full 2-page spread illustration of what they looked like when they were square dancing in them.
Yes.
So there's a lot of emphasis on that. And I was talking about this with Lance, my husband, yesterday, too, because I was just so struck by it. But so there's definitely a lot of description of their outfits, talking about, how pretty they are, making a lot of emphasis on their appearance. And while that is a limited look at, women and can be incredibly annoying to read, I do think that it's part of the charm of Nancy Drew because, we do get a lot of the, initial discounting of Nancy. Oh, you can't investigate this mystery. You're a woman. Like we get that sexism really right up front. And then we move past it incredibly quickly. People learn to trust Nancy so fast and, kind of count her as an authority and think of her as capable incredibly quickly. So while we have those kind of stereotypically feminine portrayals of girls, we also get at the same time, an incredibly capable detective. And so I just think that it's a nice representation because I mean, I'm not proclaiming to be an expert of literature at the time, but instead of having a tomboy who can solve mysteries, right? And of course they can solve mysteries because they're like a man. Mm-hmm. We get a feminine Nancy Drew who does care about clothes, does, talk about food and, cooking, and
she bakes a cake for everyone.
Right. About the domestic world. She can also be a great detective.
Yes.
And that's what I love about Nancy Drew.
I think that is a large part of her appeal, that she was, for a lot of people, the very first depiction of a strong female character who could also do men's jobs.
Who was also feminine.
Yes.
Yeah. That was definitely, when I read her as a child, that was definitely my connection with Nancy because, I do, identify very as a woman, and is very very feminine one. I mean, I don't know, but feminine to an extent. Yeah. And seeing that it could be a strength for someone instead of weakness was really positive for me.
It's nice to see that portrayal. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, Nancy knits. She knits.
Yeah,
Nancy can do it all. She can do it all.
She can. Also,
I was confused because at the beginning of the book, she's knitting for Carson. And at the end of the book, they say that she's making a sweater for Ned.
Do they?
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that was just a mistake or what the deal is, but at the very beginning at the airport, she's definitely making a sweater for Carson. And then at the end, they're like, oh, Nancy, what are you going to do now that you've solved the mystery? And she says, work on the sweater I'm knitting for Ned.
It says Dad in my copy.
Whoa.
Yeah. It says, work on the sweater I'm knitting for Dad. And then George goes, I hope your dad doesn't need that sweater very soon.
Wow. Mine says Ned. Her friend smiled. Work on the sweater I'm knitting for Ned.
How interesting. But it says Dad at the beginning.
It says Dad at the beginning and then at the end.
Let me see when mine was published.
A copy of my book was printed in 65. Yeah. So this is the original 1965 printing, I think.
Oh, wow. This one says it was 1996 printing.
So I wonder if this is a mistake and they had to correct it later.
I can't remember. Is this the very first introduction of Bess and George and Ned? Because I know that none of them are in Secret of the Old Clock, the very first book. And I want to say they're not in the second or the third one either, but I don't know for sure.
I don't think they're in the second one because I know Nancy has other friends too. Mm-hmm. And I think that one focuses on, I want to say like Helen.
Yes.
See, this is a drawback to us not reading them in order, is that we can't really... can't really talk about continuity, but it's still more important to us, I think, to read the books that we want to read. And we just love Shadow Ranch so much. Such a nostalgic book.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me want to go spend the summer on a ranch and just, be outside. I don't know what Nancy does when she's not solving mysteries. She's not in school. I don't think she has a job. What a life.
What a life. Traveling around.
Solving mysteries.
Basically just going on a lot of vacations and just happening upon mysteries whenever you get there.
Yes.
Incredible. Not even have to do legwork really to find the mysteries. People just come to you with them. Granted, I don't want a house to fall down on top of me.
No.
But otherwise, yeah, it seems great. People drive you places. You get asked out on dates by handsome cowboys. Even though apparently you have a boyfriend who's in Europe at the time. Apparently, Nancy, that's what my copy says.
They don't mention that at all. He's not brought up in this book.
It's got to be a mistake. It's got to be
It's got to be.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because I was like, if that's the very first book with Ned in it, that's a very strange way to introduce him, to just talk about his sweater and then drop him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's because of the Dave Gregory thing that they did that.
Maybe.
Because she went on a date, and that would have been scandalous.
So scandalous.
Had she been in a relationship at the time.
Mm-hmm. The 31 edition that I have that was printed in 94, the introduction is actually written by the original author, Mildred Wirt Benson. She references why the decision was to lose Helen and introduce Bess and George instead.
Wow.
Whatever became of her early chums, I never knew. In this, we're introduced to the supporting characters of plump Bess Marvin and George Fink.
Oh my God!
Poor Bess.
Poor Bess! So rude. Just so incredibly, even by the original author, getting called out like that.
Mildred, why did you hate Bess so much?
Maybe because she didn't come up with her. Maybe that was a Harriet invention.
Maybe so.
Oh, man.
What an interesting little peek into the process there.
Okay. We should start a segment called A Sexual Reading of Nancy Drew.
What?
Because the amount of times I'm like, that's what she said after reading a sentence in the book is too high. So I'll just read this quote for you really quick. Okay?
Go on.
That's where we're headed, pardner. By the way, side note, pardner, they spell it with a D, and I know it's supposed to be because that's how they say it kind of a thing, but I couldn't get past it. George said with a grin, 150 miles of the hottest, thirstiest ride you ever took. Wasn't that there was one that you snapped me too?
Yes, where Nancy descends into an orgy of excitement or something.
But I think that one must have been from the 30s version.
Was it? It must have been.
I was on the lookout for orgies. Did not come across any in the 1960s version. Probably because we were too close to free love, and they're like, no, it's too real. It's too real. We can't use the word orgy.
See, and that's one of the words I'm like, is that what it actually meant back then? Or is that something that nowadays that's what we think of as that word?
Surely it must have meant something else, but good grief.
Hopes Nancy's not descending into anything into a children's book. She's going to get a lot more backlash than just shooting a wild animal.
And I will also say, sorry, my notes are in chronological order. So I'm going through as early as chapter 2 on page 17. Nancy pretty much knows who did it. Nancy knows that it's a ranch hand immediately, right off the bat. She is like, okay, so the dog didn't bark. It has to be a ranch hand. So basically, it's just
Process of elimination, right?
Process of elimination will narrow it down. Solved. Mystery solved. Fire all your ranch hands, hire all new ones, your problems will be solved. Literally, Nancy could have told, Mr. Raleigh that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy also has serious skills with dogs. Like Nancy knits. Yes. Nancy solves mysteries. Nancy can calm a scared, angry dog.
Yeah. And horses, too. Sometimes she's able to calm those horses down.
What can't Nancy do?
Not much, it seems like.
Yeah. So I did remember that there was another mention of Ned in the book, and I found it. My copy, it's on page 111, and Bess and George are teasing Nancy because Dave, smiled at her as he walked past. And they said, George says, "And what'll poor Ned do?" George teased. Nancy grinned. We'll be home by the time he gets back from Europe.
Oh, so Ned is in Europe.
Ned is in Europe, and apparently he's in a position to where he would be jealous that another boy likes Nancy. So
this is scandalous.
It is pretty scandalous.
What are you doing to Ned, Nancy? Don't break his heart.
Literally, I didn't realize. So I should say, at this point in my life, and I think yours too, Corey, we are most exposed to Nancy Drew through the computer games because we are true fans of those computer games. And so I never realized how much of a trope it was that Nancy ignores Ned.
Mm-hmm. Me neither.
And they're all like, "Oh, poor Ned." They're always like, "Oh, poor Ned, poor Ned." And even at the end, when she's like, "Oh, I'm going to work on that sweater for Ned," or whatever, it says, "She did not know then that soon she would become involved in the secret of Redgate Farm. But George knew that Nancy and Mystery were never far apart. She gave a sigh of mock sadness. Poor Ned. I hope he doesn't need that sweater very soon."
Oh,
it's been like this since book 5. Book 5. I always felt like, well, Nancy treats him fine. Nancy treats him fine. And then in, this is kind of a spoiler alert for I want to call it the most recent game because it's honestly the most recent good game, in my opinion, Sea of Darkness.
Yes, the ones that we know and love.
When they have that relationship drama and she misses Ned's anniversary and he's all upset or whatever. I mean, obviously that's a low blow, Nancy. Terrible thing to do, right? Terrible girlfriend move. But I always kind of felt like the criticism of Nancy, being too wrapped up in her mysteries or whatever, was unjust because she's a professional girl. She's got to go out and bring home the imaginary bacon. And
even though she refuses payment for any of the mysteries,
she's got her stuff. She's got her, her hobbies. That it's perfectly fine for her to be wrapped up in that. But apparently this sentiment has been around from the beginning and I did not realize.
Do you think that has anything to do with women's roles in society back then, where women weren't supposed to be preoccupied with a job or with anything other than be there for your man?
Surely. Yeah, I'm sure.
Gets backlash because of the time period that she's living in.
Yeah, interesting. That's something we'll have to keep an eye on throughout the rest of our reading.
We'll have a Ned update segment.
Ned and Nancy update, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to talk about all the words that I don't understand and the colloquialisms that are in this that it's just off the wall?
Yes, please.
So first of all, tenderfoot. Well, what the heck? What is that? What does that even mean?
Is it a cowboy thing or is it just a 1960s thing?
Yeah, I honestly, no clue. There's that. I cotton to chocolate cake. Did you get that phrase in your version?
No.
I think Dave says it because spoiler alert, Nancy does bake a cake in this book. We talked about that a little bit already, but so literally some of the exact same stuff that happens in the game happens in this book. Nancy bakes a chocolate. Well, it's chocolate. It's not vanilla.
This is a chocolate cake.
Right? Chocolate cake. So there's different.
No tulip on it.
No tulip. But Dave says, "I cotton to chocolate cake," and I assume that means he likes it a lot. But what?
I hope so.
What?
I'm trying to find it, and I'm not sure which part it's in.
I'm going to look it up. Maybe it's cotton too. Maybe that's...
That still doesn't make any sense.
Okay, I'm looking at tenderfoot. A newcomer or novice, especially a person unaccustomed to the hardships of pioneer life. Oh, there we go. Pioneer life. So it is a slightly Western thing.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that Nancy does, in a couple spots, mention the pioneers and how hard it must have been for the poor pioneers traveling across this land. And I always just cringe so hard. Poor pioneers. Poor pioneers traveling across inhabited lands.
Stealing those lands.
Mm-hmm. Also, Dave says, there's a lot of these that come from Dave. So it probably is supposed to be a
cowboy thing.
Hired to punch cows. Surely this has something to do with, like, I don't know. Could it be fixing cows? Like, what's the word? Neutering cows or branding cows, maybe. But punching cows? Why is oh no, I bet it's the ear tag. It's probably the ear tag.
Oh.
That's definitely what it is.
Makes sense.
Funnily enough, I mean, we live in Texas, so cattle should be something that we know a little bit about, but definitely not.
Right.
Definitely not. So, so hired to punch cows. I was like, what are you doing, Dave? You want to smack them all in the face?
Oh, wait. I found the cake part. He calls Nancy Cookie.
Oh, yuck. I don't like that.
No, that's strange. Oh, no, it's Tex. Tex says it.
Oh,
Tex grinned. I sure do cotton to chocolate cake. Nancy makes scrumptious ones, said Bess.
What can't Nancy do?
And how about that? You just show up at this ranch. You don't have your recipe box with you because Nancy would have had a recipe box. She's just got this cake recipe memorized. She's like, let's get to it, guys. Let's start baking.
And baking, too. Like, I mean, cooking is one thing. You know how to make a dish. You know how to make it. But baking, I feel like you need to know how much sugar goes in that, how much, how much vanilla or, I guess, chocolate in this case. But, like, woof. But apparently it was delicious.
I'm impressed, Nancy. Good job.
She bakes, she knits, she rides horses, she calms dogs, and she solves mysteries. She's truly the
Nancy of all trades.
Nancy of all trades, the paragon of, woman detectives everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
As she should be.
As she should be. Also, on page 113, when they're in Phoenix and they go out for lunch and they talk about what they eat, tacos are in italics.
Oh my gosh, I almost Snapchatted that to you too. Like, tacos.
I've never laughed so hard when I saw tacos in italics.
Best side. That was super.
Oh, yeah.
That was a weird way to react to talking about tacos.
Whenever something tastes good, instead of saying yum with a Y, they say just with the U. And that was incredibly off-putting to me. I was like, what? You think you like it? You don't know?
I'm not sure.
You're confused about what you're eating. But apparently, because they don't know tacos is such a strange food to them that it has to be in italics.
Right.
Okay.
Do you have any other notes?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Okay, so Alice is kind of sad because all the girls have dates to the rodeo / barbecue / square dance.
Square dance.
And she doesn't, of course, because she's not going to go with an adult cowboy because that would be upsetting.
She's 14.
She's 14. But, just luckily, somehow, Bess plays matchmaker and finds out that Tex has a little brother who's also, I guess 15.
And happens to be in town.
Happens to be in town in the rodeo, and he takes Alice. His name's Jack. He meets Nancy literally, that night. And maybe it's because she's older, I don't know. But he already recognizes her as an authority. It's kind of annoying because they're talking about protecting Alice, which I guess, she's a 14-year-old girl. It's somewhat warranted. But I'm going to find it. Okay, so after the rodeo, the girls met their dates. They met Jack. Quickly, Nancy warned the boys about Bercy and Diamond. So these are the two that tried to abduct Nancy at the rodeo. Dave looked worried, and Jack spoke up. I don't know what this is all about, but no one will get Alice away from me until I turn her over to Nancy after the dance. So this little 15-year-old boy is like, it's cool. I'll keep her safe, and then I'll give her to you, Nancy.
Yeah. Nancy's really the one in charge here.
Nancy's the one in charge, and I'm glad that even Jack recognizes that, and he literally just met her, just then, 30 seconds ago. He's like, got it. she's in charge. I'll listen to what
defer to her on all
matters. I thought that was very charming. And literally, I don't understand. So there was no moment. There was no moment where Nancy was like, aha, it must be Shorty. I know it's him because of this, this, and this. But
even the thing with the thorn in the saddle, I was like, it's him. There's no way it's not him.
And apparently
breezes past that.
They were just, no, they didn't. She was like, oh, he must have been lying. And I was like, yeah, it looked like he was lying. And so they just know that it's Shorty. And then get to the end. And basically at this point, it's just assumed that we know it's Shorty too. And Shorty's acting all suspiciously at the rodeo. And Nancy's like, oh, I bet he went to warn his robber friends or whatever. And it's like, you know who it is. You know the saboteur. You know you solved the mystery, Nancy, and yet you're just letting this guy like hang out with y'all in the car. Call the sheriff. Literally, they called the sheriff because Nancy was abducted. I'm like, call him again because you know that it's Shorty. Make him arrest Shorty because clearly you could do that. You could direct the sheriff just at your whim. So tell him that it's this guy and don't let him ride back to Shadow Ranch with you.
Right?
It's bizarre.
But they're like, no, we're just gonna go riding off into the mountains at dark. We don't know where we're going.
Right.
And we're just gonna hope he doesn't find us out there, even though he's probably following us. And we're gonna plan for him following us.
You have so many opportunities to be like, hey, Sheriff, listen, I'm pretty sure it's Shorty Thurman. Shorty Steele. There you go. I slipped. He's been doing sketchy things. He forgot to fill our water bottle. He's tried to sabotage my horse a couple times. Pretty sure he is cavorting with these robbers. We think it's probably a good idea if you at least talk to him.
Yeah.
At the very least. But instead, it's like, no, they just kind of basically ignore him and are just quiet whenever he's around.
Yeah, talk loudly and say something wrong to throw him off the trail.
Have him arrested, Nancy! What are you doing?
She seems hesitant to consult any sort of law enforcement until she's already about to be killed for finding out the truth.
I suppose. I mean, it is a detective story, and I suppose the detective has to have some agency. So I get that, I guess. It seems extreme to me that the man who's been literally like almost openly threatening you. At least that he's friends with the people who've been openly threatening you. Surely there's something you should be doing about that.
Maybe don't go wandering off into the desert by yourself
and just
dark.
Assume that he's not going to follow you.
Right.
Okay. Do we want to talk about similarities between the book and the game?
Oh, yes.
I
love the game so much.
It's pretty on the nose. I mean,
it is.
After reading the book, I was incredibly surprised. I was like, yeah, for sure. Obviously they had to combine some characters, cut some plot points, but overall, it's pretty straight on as to what the plot is in the book. And obviously they added some extra puzzles for gameplay, right? That all makes sense, but the plot is the same.
Yeah, I did not expect it to be as true to the book as it was.
We've already mentioned that Nancy bakes a cake in both.
Yeah.
There is Mary. This time in the game, she gets a last name. Hey.
Yes. She's not just referred to as the Indian woman.
Right. Actually, girl. I think it's a little bit It's a little bit more diminutive. Yeah.
They say girl. Yeah, even after they introduce her as a character, they don't refer to her as Mary. They just keep referring to her as the Indian girl or my Indian friend Mary. Just call her Mary. That's her name. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But yes, Mary's given a real part in this story because she's really only there in the book to own her store and give some information about Francis. So
yeah, but in the game, Mary has a thing with Tex, so that's definitely not in the book, which is unfortunate, honestly. But I guess it would have been scandalous because did he take George or I think George? I think he took George to the barbecue/rodeo/square dance.
Yes. Oh, Bess and George are actually at the ranch in the book, where we're just phone contacts in the game.
Not trapped at the airport. Yeah.
I understand the reasons for it, but it does make Nancy a little bit more lonely at the ranch in the game. So,
and Ed Raleigh and Bet Raleigh obviously are in it and not trapped at the hospital because Ed got bit by a rattlesnake.
Right. Yeah, none of that happens in the book.
It all makes sense. As to why they chose to do those things. And I think in some of the ways it was pretty smart decisions as far as the reasons why, like Bess and George were still going to come, but there was obviously some travel issues, and the Raleighs would have been in it, but there was an accident because of the sabotage at the ranch, which makes sense.
Right.
So it
was done really well.
It is. It's done really well, and it holds up, I think. And so this is your cue to go replay it if you haven't, because I'm definitely going to be doing that soon.
I only played it about maybe 2 months ago, and I already want to replay it again. Yeah. I think that's the one I've replayed the most of all the games. I love it so much.
I do love it too. I love having to go get eggs. I love baking the cake. I love the domesticity of it. What I was just complaining about before. But no, I love the game. And I think the puzzles in it are particularly smart, because sometimes in the nature of your games you kind of get silly puzzles that don't really fit the circumstances. Just like random Sudoku puzzle.
It feels more natural here.
It feels very natural in the Shadow Ranch game. Obviously, we're not here to discuss the Shadow Ranch game. We're talking about the Shadow Ranch book, but it's a great game. It's just a great game.
It is a great game. I mean, we're covering Shadow Ranch anyway. I don't know if we'll do a whole episode on just the game, so we might as well discuss it now. Right.
Oh, it's also, so don't they also use phosphorescent paint for the horse in...
Yes.
Yeah, so it's the same trick. They use the same trick for the Phantom Horse in both the book and the game, which is...
Make him glow.
Yeah, which is nice. Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of the times probably it's easy to like update something or like make it make more sense, but not that phosphorescent paint doesn't make sense, which is probably why they kept it. But I appreciate the consistency.
Yes. I'm glad that they kept Shorty as the bad guy as well.
Yeah.
I read the book long before I even knew of the game's existence, but have played the game so much that that's now Shadow Ranch in my head, and I completely forgotten what had happened in the book at all. So going back and rereading it, I was like, is he going to be the bad guy? I don't even remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
They changed Dave's story a little bit as well. His aunt was like the cousin of Francis, right?
Right.
But in the book, he's just directly descended. I don't know if he's a grandchild or great-grandchild.
Right. That's how he got the letters in the game. He read the letters between them where Francis had told his ancestor or whoever about
the existence of the treasure.
Right.
And that gave Nancy some clues, enough to go solve the mystery. So
thanks, Dave.
But yeah, maybe they just didn't want to explain the whole plot line of Frances did move on and get married afterward and then have her own children. I think that they just didn't want to have to address that. So like, it's his distant aunt's aunt. Like,
it's much more narratively impactful to think that she died lonely and sad because her true love perished. So, do they talk about how old she was when she was involved with Dirk?
I can't remember.
Because I want to say that she was like 16.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Dang, I wish I had made it up. Maybe it probably doesn't say.
Right.
But I think it's kind of implied that she's pretty young. But
you can assume.
That it was probably an age gap there because you have this adult male bank robber who is on the run from the law. Surely he's lived some life. And she's a very, sheriff's daughter. Mm-hmm. So probably has not.
Still lives at home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I like to think that maybe Frances grew up a little bit and, was probably very sad, that Dirk died, but was able to move on somewhat and grow up. And obviously she did get married and have kids. So hopefully she was able to to not be sad forever and then die alone.
Yeah.
So are there any other books that are directly translated into the computer games? Because the only one that I saw, I think, and I actually don't own this one, but like title for title is Phantom of Venice.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Well, I know Secret of the Old Clock. Obviously, that's one of Her Interactive's games, but it's not like Shadow Ranch in that it's taken just from Old Clock. I think it's from the first 3 books. They kind of mash all the plot lines together, so it's not as close.
Right.
But I haven't read Phantom of Venice. I think that it's not one of the original 56, isn't it? It's like a later edition.
Yeah, it's in one of the they start. Oh gosh, I don't remember when, but they like extended them at a certain point, so it's part of the extended yellow hardbacks. It's like 60.
Oh, it was.
Well, but like they were written later, I think, 60 something. So like after 61.
I had no idea. I think there is a website that lists if it was based off of a book. I think the very first Nancy Drew files is Secrets Can Kill.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah.
I haven't read any of the Nancy Drew files, so I'm not totally sure.
I love the Nancy Drew files. They're just so wonderfully 80s. It's so fantastic. So that is definitely a series that we're going to have to delve into. But yeah,
I look forward to it.
I think you're right. That sounds right to me.
Mm.
So maybe we should keep that on our list to read soon.
I'd love to see what the original Secrets Can Kill book was like.
On that note, Corey, do you want to talk about what our next book is going to be?
Sure. We've chosen number 43, The Mystery of the 99 Steps.
I don't know why I'm holding it up like
they can see us. So I have no preconceived notions about what this is going to be about.
Same.
I have no idea what we're going to go into here, but I hope it's a good one.
I have no memory of this. I mean, honestly, I have no memory of reading any of these because I was so young when I did. Mm. But literally no clue what the contents of this book is. So that's exciting.
I think that this is George with her on the cover.
It's got to be. Yeah.
And then I don't know who's at the top of the staircase. The cover here is Nancy and I assume George going through some doorway, and there's 99 steps behind them. So I guess they've come down into some super dark basement or something.
Some kind of janky doorway. There's like a splintery piece of wood inches away from George's head.
At the top of the stairs, do we think that's Bess or our bad guy?
Someone who seems to be wearing a dress. Mm-hmm. It's definitely, or maybe that's supposed to be some kind of coat or cape or something.
So I don't know if Bess is keeping watch at the top of the stairs or if she just is not invited to this and that's the bad guy following them down the stairs. We'll find out.
We will find out. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about is related to Shadow Ranch?
Oh, lots of things. We could talk for hours, but...
Okay. But you want to leave it there?
I think that's everything off the top of my head.
Okay.
We should do a rating, like 5 out of 5 magnifying glasses. Or what metric do we want to use? Magnifying glasses, flashlights?
Maybe flashlights, because that's kind of alliterative.
Okay, so out of 5 flashlights, how many flashlights would you give this one?
Shadow Ranch, I would give at least 3, but probably 4 out of 5 flashlights. Yeah. Just for the nostalgia's sake. There was some bits of the mystery that I felt were a little bit disjointed, but overall compelling, overall fun to read. Yeah, 4 out of 5 flashlights.
I think 4 out of 5 flashlights. Maybe for the 1930s version, that might be 3 flashlights for me. But the newer, updated one, that's 4 flashlights.
Yeah, I think. Cool. Okay. Also, we have a question for you, regular Drews out there. If you will visit our social media, our Twitter and our Instagram tomorrow, we will have a question for you to decode. And we would love it if you could, instead of telling us what the question is, answer the question for us and let us know what your answer would be. Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $1 level receive early access to each episode, as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there,
thanks for listening.